Macmillan Audio presents Get Some Headspace by Andy Puddicombe. Read for you by the author.
Get Some Headspace. Written and read by Andy Puddicombe. Introduction. It was already well past midnight. I sat on top of the wall and looked down. The tall pine trees from inside the grounds gave me plenty of cover in the darkness, yet I couldn't resist the urge to look back one last time to see if I'd been followed. How had it come to this? I looked down again. It was just over 12 feet to the pavement. It may not sound that high, but crouching there in a flimsy pair of sandals and my night clothes, the thought of jumping made me wince. What was I thinking, wearing sandals? I tucked them into my trouser bottoms as I crept through the monastery, trying not to wake any of the other monks. I'd gone to the monastery to contemplate life, and yet here I was, scaling its walls and contemplating my sandals as I prepared to jump back into the world. Of course, it was never meant to be this way. I trained as a Buddhist monk before, and in much more challenging environments. But other monasteries had exuded a warmth, a kind and caring approach to what can only be described as a challenging yet very fulfilling way of life. This one had felt different, though. It was a Buddhist monastery like no other, locked in day and night, surrounded by high stone walls, and with no way of contacting anyone on the outside. At times it had felt more like a prison. I had no one to blame but myself, of course. After all, I'd gone there of my own free will. It's just that, well, traditionally, monasticism is a little different from the mafia. It's not usually the case that once you become a monk, that's it, for life, with no way out. In fact, on the contrary, Buddhist monasteries are known and respected for their tolerance and compassion. So how I'd ended up doing a bunk over a 12-foot wall to get away from this one really was a mystery. It had all started a few years earlier, when I made the decision to pack up and head off to Asia to become a monk. I was at university at the time, studying sports science. It may sound like a dramatic change in lifestyle, but it felt like one of the easiest decisions I'd ever made. Understandably, my friends and family were slightly more apprehensive than I was, perhaps wondering if I'd finally lost my mind. But all of them were nonetheless supportive. It was a different story at university, however. On hearing the news, my head of year suggested that a trip to see the doctor for some Prozac might be a more sensible option. As well-meaning as he might have been, I couldn't help thinking he was missing the point. Did he really think I was going to find the type of happiness and fulfillment I was after in a bottle of prescription medicine? As I walked out of the door of his office, he said, "Andy, you'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." As it turns out, it happens to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. Now, you may be wondering what kind of person suddenly decides one day to head off to Asia and become a Buddhist monk. Perhaps you're imagining a self-medicating student who'd lost his way, or a creative type with a desire to rebel against a consumerist society. But the reality was actually far more mundane. At the time, I just really struggled with my mind. Not in a straitjacket kind of way, you understand. But I struggled with the endless thinking. It felt as if my mind was permanently switched on, going round and round like a washing machine. Some of the thoughts I liked, a lot of the thoughts I didn't like. The same was true of the emotions. As if a busy head wasn't enough, I felt as though I was always drifting into unnecessary worry, frustration and sadness. They were quite ordinary levels of emotion, but they had a tendency to spin out of control every now and then. And when they did, there was nothing I could do about it. It felt as though I was at the mercy of these feelings and would get blown around by them. On a good day, everything was fine, but on a bad day, it felt like my head would explode. Given the strength of feeling, the desire to train the mind was never far from my thoughts. I had no idea how to do it properly, but I'd come into contact with meditation at a very early age and knew that it offered a potential solution. Now, I wouldn't want you to think that I was some kind of child prodigy and spent my teenage years sat cross-legged on the floor, because that's most definitely not the case. I didn't take up the full-time study of meditation until I was 22.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?